much. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could tell me by show of hands, how many of you are in active family practice? How many people? Oh, lots of you. Okay, great. Some people kind of not so sure, so some people doing locums or working at other practices, transitioning out. Okay. When you leave your family practice, how many of you expect that you'll be able to sell your practice for money? Okay, so you all need to move to Hamilton. We've been quite successful in selling practices in the last couple of years, and anywhere between $10,000 to $50,000. These are my funders. It's a nonprofit group. All of the organizations that you see listed here in Hamilton decided to get together, pool their resources so that we could address the physician shortage. So what I want to do today is to share some of the tips and the best practices that I've seen over those last 8 years and to help you with your practice. Who needs to plan for retirement? Well, besides Stephen Harper, you do too. If we take a look at family physicians in BC as compared to the national percentages, you have a smaller number of younger people practicing in BC than the national average, but a higher number of older physicians. So I thought that was quite interesting. There are about 2,000 family physicians here in BC who are over the age of 55. That's generally the age at which physicians will start to think about, well, what does the future look like and how is it going to change? What am I going to do with my practice? Certainly the group over 65, if there are people, and that number in BC is close to 600, those 600 physicians, if they are working in a full-time family practice or they're committed to a group of patients, they definitely want to be considering what's going to be happening next. So you might wonder, well, why don't I just close my doors? Why do I even bother looking for somebody? I can just turn the key one day and walk out. Well, we're going to be looking at some obligations that you have to your patients and your staff, but I'd also say that you owe it to yourself to really think about what you would like your plan to look like, how you would like to leave family practice, and the memories and the legacy that you're going to have. What would you like that to be? And I would submit that the physicians that I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds of physicians in Ontario, that the ones who have put together a succession plan and that we've been able to find someone to take over their practice, that those physicians have been far happier either in retirement or when they're doing locums or in the next stage of their career. They're far happier than the ones who have unfortunately had to close their doors. What happens if you don't plan? Well, we've certainly seen that happen in our own community. We had an older physician who started to get sick, landed up in the ICU, still said, the family was calling me saying, don't worry, Jane, just find a locum and we're going to be okay because Dad's going to be right back and he's going to be right at it. And sure enough, he was for several months working part-time. Meanwhile, his colleagues were covering his patients. But things did get to the point where the physician unfortunately had to be admitted back to the ICU, and there he died. The family were left with then trying to grieve the loss of their father and the wife of her husband, but then also they're trying to deal with this practice too. And, the business bank account was shut down the day after he died because he's no longer around. So then they were trying to figure out, well, how do we get the billings in? How do we get the staff paid? How do we make sure that the rent is paid? And there were just so many issues to handle on top of the regular grieving process that I think it definitely, you want to think about your family. I know it's easy to hide your head in the sand and to not think about, well, what's going to happen next? But it really can pay off and be a good idea. Now, when you decide to take that leap, so as my daughter here in the French Alps, 12 years old, decides to jump out of this church steeple, before you do that, and that's what leaving family practice, I think, can feel like for many of you, because you're wondering, I don't know what this looks like. I don't know if someone's going to come in. What if I don't like this new person? My patients have always had me. They love me. They're not going to want to see somebody else. So I understand that there are a lot of issues that you're dealing with. So psychologically, you need to gear yourself up for that and recognize that retirement is inevitable, but that you can approach it in a methodical way, and just like you were preparing for exams when you were younger, and maybe your CFPC exams later on, that you can prepare for this and that it's okay to be nervous. There is a lot of nervousness, and absolutely that's understandable. One of the wonderful things about family medicine is that you have so many different options and places that you can go. So you can choose to retire from your practice and go and surf in Hawaii or spend time in your villa in France, or you might choose to transition slowly. The third option then is to transition out of your practice so that you hand that over to somebody else, and that then you start doing locums or emerge. Maybe you're involved with the college, mentoring programs. There are lots of different ways that your expertise and knowledge and experience can be well utilized. There are 3 important slides today. This is one of them. So anybody want to get out their pen and start writing away? It's from the OMA. They put out a terrific document called Winding Down Your Practice. So the considerations that you want to look at, legislative and professional, your business obligations, and your practice issues. So we'll take a minute to look at those individually. The patient notification, obviously there are legislation that dictates how much notice you need to give to your patients. But you need to think about these issues and to be strategic about it, because you don't necessarily want to give your patients a lot of notice, because then they leave. There's going to be less of a practice there for you to sell or for you to hand over to somebody else. But at the same time, you need to give them enough notice so that if you're not able to find somebody for your practice, they're going to be able to find another care provider. Medical records, you're going to need to be thinking about, well, do I have paper EMR right now? Where am I going to store those records? Who's going to take them over? So a number of issues in that regard. From the business standpoint, 2 of the big ones are your lease. You're obviously not going to want to be signing on a 5-year lease when you turn 65 and you're thinking that you only want to work for 3 more years. And you don't want to get caught in the trap of thinking, oh, my office is absolutely fabulous, I'll sign a 5-year lease because the new person is going to want to assume it. Oh, bad idea there. In terms of staff obligations, there can be significant severance issues to your employees. So something that you'll want to discuss with your BCMA lawyer or your business lawyer. If you have employees who have been working for you for 10, 20 or so years, you have financial obligations towards that person. Practice agreements, think about either agreements that you have with the ministry or that you have with your partners. What does it say if you're in a group practice? How much notice do you have to give your partners of your impending retirement? There are lots of practical issues as well. The phone needs to be put in somebody else's name. The internet needs to be canceled, those sorts of things. How long is all of this going to take? Well, certainly it's not something that happens overnight, and you're probably looking at a minimum of a year, but sometimes it's several years. The recruitment. It's very much like a first date. It's almost like marriage. You're trying to find somebody who is going to match your values and provide the type of care for your patients that you've been providing all of these years. So it can take a bit of time. These are the steps that I go through when I'm recruiting a new physician to a practice, and we'll look at these individually. So in terms of identifying the opportunity, first of all, you and I need to understand what is it that you're looking for. Are you working full-time? Do you do obstetrics? What's the call schedule like? Do you have ER shifts? What about nursing homes? So that we get a complete picture of your practice and start to develop an idea of what the new person is going to look like. You have an excellent organization here in BC called Health Match BC. I see my colleagues at various conferences throughout the year. We'll be in Toronto in a couple of weeks, in November at Family Medicine Forum. But they can certainly assist you. as well as your divisions of family practice. And some of them have been quite successful in terms of looking at the practices and then bringing new people in. Remember that you are marketing your practice, so that you don't want to tell the new person that, oh, how it was much better in the old days, and how, well, our small town used to be more prosperous and now we're on the decline, and oh, buildings are all boarded up, and oh, it looks like hell. You want to remain positive, so smile. And yes, this is the way it is. I think overall across the country that family medicine is far more attractive to young people than it used to be, and certainly we've seen that in the choices that young people have made when they're choosing their residency program. So there are lots of young people out there, and it's a matter of trying to make sure that your practice is marketed to them and that they're attracted to it. When you're meeting and selecting a physician, that can get a bit tricky, because when you're bringing someone new into your office, you might not want to tell the staff why they're there. So you might want to schedule meetings after work, or you might want to say this is a resident and they're thinking about doing an elective here. Think of a number of ways that you can bring the person in without sort of scaring off your staff and the patients. The transition time period can last 6 months, possibly a year, and that's when we start to look at, I put together a 2-page checklist of all the activities that need to happen, and with due dates, when people need to do things by, when do their billing number to the college, or when are they going to meet the staff, when do we have contracts, which I would definitely advise you to have a contract with a new physician. So all of those sorts of things, that's in the transition phase. There is one other piece that doesn't necessarily concern you as much, but for me as a recruiter, it is very important, and that's retention. Once I get somebody in Hamilton, I'm not going to let them go. So I need to think about, well, what do they need in their lives to make this a success? So it's not only the professional side, but it can be personal things as well. How do I help their spouse find employment? Do I need to help them get a house? Do I need to get their kids into certain extracurricular activities? But it's the whole picture, the whole family. Any ideas about what new doctors want? What do you think? Anybody who'd like to hazard a guess?
EMR.
EMR, absolutely. That's one of the top 3 for sure.
Larger group.
And group practices, yeah.
No call.
No call, because I'd like work-life balance, please. Yeah. Okay, so if we take a look at our list, the group practices, that's the number 1, EMR, bright, clean office. So if right away, if you look at this list, and if your practice isn't meeting those 3, then you want to think, do you want to consider moving your practice in that direction, or are you going to try to find somebody without being in one of these situations? Definitely, if your practice hasn't been painted in the last 15 years, if there are old brochures, old paperwork that needs to be gotten rid of. It's like selling a home. You need to go through it and come in with a fresh set of eyes and think, well, what do I need to do to brighten up this place so that a new person can see the value in the practice? So some other things that new physicians have told me about. Obviously, they want to understand the financial aspect of your practice. Commitment by the older physician to leave. I have this lovely physician in Hamilton, absolutely delightful, that I've been working with for the last 3 or 4 years. And the other day I received an email from him, and he said, Jane, we need to sit down. Clearly whatever I'm doing isn't working, because we still haven't found anybody. And I have introduced quite a few young people to him, but it's just never quite right. And the problem is he keeps waffling on when he wants to go. And the new people say, I don't want to wait till next year. I don't want to wait. And how do I even know if next year for sure is when he is going to leave? I need to know when he's going to leave, and I need a commitment to that. So that definitely is huge for young people. The reasonable call work hours, that comes into play too. Sometimes a new person will want to test a practice by doing a locum. And that is definitely something that you might want to consider, because it allows you and your staff to evaluate the new physician and see if there's a fit. They want good colleagues. I mean, don't we all want to work in a good environment? The mentoring we have had some just wonderful examples of the younger physician coming in and working for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and the older physician being there as well, so that they can explain to them, these are the specialists we use, or this is, you know, the particulars of this person, or to explain your practice to them so that they don't feel as though they've just jumped into a situation and that they're left to sink or swim. You want to be like Gumby and Pokey and be flexible, because if we look at the practices where I've been successful in attracting new physicians, the older physician or the physician leaving the practice has been well organized. They've been flexible. They've been willing to accommodate the other person. And you know, accommodation goes both ways. It's definitely not one-sided. You want to be aware that you might be feeling nervous about this, but that it's okay, that you're going to make a commitment and stick to it, that it's a fair contract for both of you, and that there is some sort of mentoring program. Just like when you were at med school, there's homework now too. So if you're thinking about transitioning out of your practice, you want to take a look at it, see if you need to do any spring cleaning, see what you need to do to spruce it up. Identify the issues, your key considerations, look at those, see what needs to happen, and then put together a recruitment plan. I definitely, with the hundreds of physicians that I've helped in our city, I would strongly recommend that you do put together a plan, and I wish you all the best with it. Thank you.